Okay, so we're on lesson number 173 of A Work with A Course in Miracles. It's better late than never, I guess. Um, we had some visitors here early this morning to take down a tree, and so there was a lot of commotion and chainsaws, and I didn't think the chainsaw noises would sort of fit in with the lesson. God is but love, and therefore so am I. I will step back and let him lead the way. God is but love, and therefore so am I. I walk with God in perfect holiness. So, all of these lessons are being given to us and designed to help us go back to remember the only thing that's really true, in spite of our thinking that other things are going on in this world. The only purpose for this world is for us to remember who we are in relationship to our creation and our creator, so we can return to our natural state of creating as one. Um, and the requirement for the occurrence of that is the undoing of all the false, the underpinnings that hold the illusion together in our mind and cause us to think that that which we see around us has a reality, separate from the imagery that's being projected from our mind, and that somebody else is responsible for what's occurring to us, when in fact we are that which is responsible. Um, and the first one, I will step back and lead the way. If you can remember that, and in the other line that would go with that is the ego always speaks first. Um, and if you could remember that the ego always sticks first, so your ego always speaks first, and allow yourself when that voice, and by now, the truth is by now, you should be getting used to um, and be able to recognize the thoughts that the ego thought system fosters, as an attempt to distract and detract us from the purpose, for which we've all somehow found our way to this, I don't know what you want to call it, this incredible work from Jesus called The Course in Miracles. So when you remember that the ego always speaks first, then the next step is I will step back and let him lead the way out of the chaos and out of the conflict, out of the condition of sickness, pain, suffering, and death that the ego wants us to struggle with in our thought that it's real. Because if it can capture our attention and keep our minds on that which seems to be occurring outside of us, and keep us in conflict and in constant sort of preoccupation with that which it's presenting to us, then we never take that pause, or we never allow for that moment when we step back and let something else occur that's outside of the scope of anything the ego can foster. And I assure you, and many of you are already there, I know, have had the experience that is required to help us remember why we want to do this. When the contacts we have with the Holy Spirit, the miracles that seem to be occurring, and for some of you, the revelatory experiences where for a fact, God is but love, and therefore so am I. There's an interesting thing in the notes from Helen, and when Bill was given the instructions as to what to include into the course, and what to exclude from the Course, it was based on the personal nature of some of what occurred right after Helen would have these revelatory experiences, and Jesus offers us an explanation that a revelatory experience is when we experience the profound nature of God's love for us, and they're not reciprocal. So it's the means by which God communicates to us the only thing that he can communicate to us, which is love, because love is all there is and God is love. So when Helen would have these moments, and while there's not a lot in there written about when she has these moments, other than a couple times when Jesus he makes the statement that the nature of the personal nature of some of the notes that Helen takes is due to the revelatory experiences that she seems to have when she's on her own and alone and enters into the state where God is expressing his love, which is always going on, but she's obviously had the ability at certain point in times to let go of all seeming conflict and fear and guilt for a second, to allow the love to come through to her so purely. And when that happens, the nature of the notes get very, very personal messages from Jesus to her, which are not the generalizable nature of the notes that the Course were designed to be organized around, that would apply to all of us. So contrary to popular belief, when Jesus asked Bill to clean up, so to speak, the personal messages, it wasn't necessarily about the people per se and the personal parts of her life, but the personal messages that came through that were particular to Helen because of the nature of the revelatory experiences that she was having with her own direct contact with God. And what I would say is, there's Helen apparently did not, in a sense, take the time. This is just something that I came to understand about the nature of the communication that Helen actually had with Jesus. And many of you who have had your own personal experiences of direct communication with Jesus, or direct communication with any one of your guides from beyond space and time, as well as a revelatory experience of God being love, you understand that these light experiences come as you relinquish the darkness within you, and they come with a certain responsibility for the need to integrate them into your living through the application of the principles. Without the application of the principles, the light experiences have the ability to cause consternation. And there's a section where he talks about, preparing miracle workers who, if he didn't prepare them correctly, would have experiences of miracles happening through them and be more scared than those who were also benefiting from the miracles, because they wouldn't understand the beneficent nature of them. And Helen seemed to be of that category in a sense, in her unwillingness to really practice the principles the way they were given. And at the end she said, I know it's true, I just don't believe it. I know it's all true, I just don't believe it. Part of what I've been given to understand with this is, because it's all, the atonement's a well laid out plan, there are no accidents in salvation. Part of the reason why this was so, and part of the reason why Helen was actually chosen in addition to the fact that she was likewise prepared for this in another era of time, in another life, that another sojourn of ours, was because the course needs to be associated with the authorship of Jesus and not with Helen Schuckman. Helen Schuckman as scribe and Bill as the editor. Those roles need to be honored, because when you say yes to Jesus in the willingness to fulfill your function, the function is fulfilled, and that which he asks you to do gets done through you, not by the power that you think we utilize as egos in space and time, but by the power of the divine nature of who we are in truth as the Christ. So it was very important to Jesus in the nature of this communication that all three be understood as having fulfilled their role and not usurping the power of the other, which is the problem that we have with the idea of separation, our relationship to God as our creator. The thought that we usurped his power and are now being hounded by the hounds of heaven to give back that which we were never capable of taking in the first place. So it was important that Jesus be recognized as the author, and if Helen had gone through a profound transformation wherein which she recognized herself as the Christ and integrated that totally, then there would have been the ability to contribute authorship to Helen rather than contribute authorship to Jesus, and Helen being recognized as the scribe that she was, and the just scribe, as Jesus says. You're not just a scribe, you are just a just scribe, meaning you are honest in the partaking of your role and the assignment of authorship to Jesus. And she was a stickler for the details, and wanting to get it correct. That was part of her nature. So she was the perfect scribe for it, in that she also was not capable of being attributed the authorship because it was so alien to the life she seemed to exhibit here within space-time. So God is but love, and therefore so am I. And when you begin to have these direct contacts, these experiences of the love of God, you understand how personal everything becomes, how open you are to, in a sense, the direct communication that bypasses the ego's attempt to give meaning to events that seem to occur in order to co-opt those events in your mind to distract you from the purpose that you're here to serve in the acceptance of the atonement and the fulfilling of your function here in space and time as the means by which we undergo our awakening, and the process of our awakening, so that we can bring about the recognition of the non-necessity for space and time for any of us any longer. And that is a collaborative venture. And salvation, which can be seen as a collaborative venture, as Jesus says, he wanted and he wants the three of them, Jesus, Helen, and Bill, to be recognized as participating in a collaborative venture as part of the plan. And he wants Jesus, Helen, and Bill to be demonstrations of the ability for someone to say yes to being part of a collaborative venture, and having that collaborative venture be made manifest as a demonstration of not only the willingness, but the ability for the power of Christ in us all to fulfill the roles in which we are given. So it's very important to begin to understand that for yourself personally, because every one of us shares the same mind. So every one of us who is offered the ability to fulfill our function, the willingness to say yes, allows us to remember that we can step back and let him lead the way. And in the allowance for him to lead the way comes the ability to fulfill our function by grace, by the grace of God, rather than through the struggle and turmoil of the ego, which is the reversal of the temporal order and the ability to see that there is a way out, and that living in a condition that is not inclusive of the grace of God is not how a child of God feels at home. So I will step back and let him lead the way, because God is but love, and therefore so am I. And when I let him lead the way, I do walk in the ways of perfect holiness with God, because God is the mind which I think, and in the oneness of our creation with God and God's oneness with us, we are perfectly holy and created in his likeness and similitude, in his image, not as a body in space and time, but as a reality of our divine nature. Remember, thoughts do not leave their source. So if God is but love, then therefore so am I. So if God is what perfect holiness is, and I am part and parcel of the perfect holiness of God the Creator, then I must likewise walk with God in the perfect holiness. And I think, from my own experience of revelation and in the personal communications that I receive, there's nothing that either Jesus, our brother, nor God, our Father, would like more than a return to what we call paradise. And when God calls on you and says, Adam, where are you? Instead of hiding, we say, here I am, Lord, and walk in the garden with God, in our perfect holiness with him, as friend, as brother with Jesus, as creator, demonstrating our ability to create in the harmony and unity of eternal life, and the fact that God is but love. So when I hear this line, I walk with God in perfect holiness, it harkens to one of those personal messages that I was given, where I was told, I just want to walk with you in the garden. So here I am, Lord.